Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Today we're going to be talking about how to take the best notes to optimize your time and energy, and of course to get top grades. Today's video is going to be a little bit more on the general side, how to manage, organize, reorganize, and enjoy taking notes. Back to school is starting soon, so we're getting in the aesthetic, we're getting in the vibe, and I know everyone's excited, including me. But in all seriousness, I'm going to be talking about how to manage your notes for classes that are content heavy and difficult, and how you can get through it with ease. So let's get into it. So the first strategy for creating the best notes is to organize your classes into two categories. So there's objective classes and subjective classes. Objective classes would be like science, tech, math, languages, anything like that. These are classes with unwavering structures, methods, and principles of interpretation. The content is measurable and verifiable. Subjective classes would be like English, history, philosophy, and creative arts. And these are classes where structures, methods, and principles of understanding are based on interpretation and analysis. It can differ by school of thought or the individual. Personally, I tend to be attracted to subjective classes, and those are where I get my highest grades. There can be crossover between subjective and objective classes. For example, with French, the grammar is objective. You would take notes objectively, but then of course with reading and oral practices, there can be subjective thought involved. Or for example, you can have subjective classes like history and English. However, there are objective components like grammar or historical facts that are irrefutable. So here's how you're going to organize your notes for objective classes. Definitions, steps, examples. The reason that we start with definitions is because it's important to be clear about what everything is before we start applying our knowledge. And of course we have steps, which is next. And steps is basically just your application. And application, which is of course the most important result of learning, is carrying through with an objective process. Examples of application are solving a math equation using the scientific method, or forming a sentence in Spanish. So after you've established your definitions, your steps for how to carry through with the process, for example, how to form grammatical sentences, then of course you have your examples. When you look back at your notes, you should be able to easily identify what your definitions are, what your steps are, and where your examples are. If you have those three components, then you can color code and font code according to those three categories, which is really effective because it's easy to look back on and it looks nice, of course. So with subjective classes, the three core categories are timeline, concepts, and details. People struggle to make notes in subjective classes. I struggled to make notes in subjective classes. Let me paint a picture for you of what you should not do in a subjective class. Picture this, you're in an IBHL history class. There's a textbook for every unit and a chapter to read every single night. You're a slow reader, you're slogging through 20 pages of whatever, it sounds like jumble that you don't even understand. You're not retaining any information. And by the time you've written notes, you've basically just copy-pasted the textbook, and you spent several hours doing that. When your test rolls around, you almost fail because you can't possibly extract the valuable information from the mountain of information that you've accumulated in your note-taking. You're working harder than you need to. Okay, so pause, go back. You're in an IBHL history class. There's a textbook for every unit and a chapter to read every night. At the end of the chapter, there's a chapter summary. You go to the chapter summary, you read through it, you put it into AI, and you ask, please provide a timeline for these events or any related events at the time. If you have chapter questions, you put the chapter questions in with the information and you say, please relate this content and create a timeline with related events at the time. So instead of reading 20 pages, you take what the AI has written, and if they've written a lot, then you can ask it to cut it down and you put it into your notes for now. Now you ask, please provide key concepts and themes for each item in this timeline. And then you take that and you add it to your notes in a different color or a different font, however you want to color code that. Key concepts and themes, for example, in history would be like, this was a period of détente, and of course more info on that. Now you're gonna skim the chapter, keyword skim, and see what key details fit into your categorization of your timeline and your concepts. Each of these 3 components is going to be in a different color or font or however you want to do it to differentiate them. And then now you have your timeline, your concepts, and your details. You understand the material more. When your teacher takes it up in class, instead of trying to record every single thing they're saying and record every detail because you don't understand the overall concepts, you're just going to listen to what they say, relax, and you're going to take notes according to key information or important information. So now when you go back to study for tests, you can either study the timeline of when things happen if you're doing a content test. You can study details, again, if it's a content test or an overall test, or let's say it's an essay. You have those key concepts and it's relatively an essay format. I wish I had done this sooner because let me tell you, I spent so many hours making ineffective notes for subjective classes. But by the end of the year, I was able to master this note-taking style, put in very minimal effort for a very fruitful result, if you will. So I hope that helps for how to take notes for objective classes and subjective classes. So now let's look at the second strategy for taking good notes. Your homework is your notes. That might sound really obvious, but a lot of people will blow through homework questions and not really take into consideration that these questions are going to show up again. There's a reason that your teacher is giving you these questions for homework, because they're important and they're actually the basis of what you should know. So if you're reading or annotating or answering questions on a passage, make it look visually appealing. Don't get rid of it. Jot side notes on a separate page. Do what you gotta do, format it how you gotta format it, but make sure you're color coding, using headings, and keeping things understandable and organized, again, in these 3 categories. For objective classes, it's definitions, steps, examples. For subjective classes, it's timeline, concepts, and details. Let's say for homework, you're solving equations from a textbook. Make sure you're color coding the questions, the answers, and the points of confusion so that in class you can easily identify the areas where you're struggling and you can quickly correct that. I recommend uploading the textbook pages and the questions to a digital platform so that you can easily access and correct your answers. Again, info from your notes will appear on tests, but it's often the application questions that you've been doing in your homework that will reemerge that are actually worth the most marks. So integrate your homework into your notes. That's the main point here. Time for the third method for taking optimal notes. And take this with a grain of salt because this was just my experience, but make the switch to digital if you haven't already. Keep everything digital if you can. If you just have a computer, use it as much as you can. If you just have an iPad, use it as much as you can. Even if it's a family computer, use it as much as you can. And I'm aware that not everyone has access to these technologies, which is totally okay because you can make beautiful handwritten notes. I have plenty of friends that did it. I did it until halfway through grade 11 when I got an iPad, but I'm telling you, it changed everything when I started keeping things digital because it just helps with organization and categorization. So here's my 3 reasons why I think digital notes are superior. My argument, I guess, is against people who would say that you retain things better if you're doing it by hand. Let me tell you why I retained everything so much better, from easy classes to dense heavy classes, using digital notes instead of handwritten notes. Reason number 1, digital notes are easier to access and manage. I used various digital platforms, but mainly OneNote and Google Docs. I used OneNote for literally every class. I even used it for my RCM exams where I could input voice recordings and pictures, all kinds of things like that. And I even used it for classes like math where you can create a grid paper background, you can format things however you want, and you can write directly into the program. And of course, there's the Control F feature where you can easily find keywords when you're studying. This is hugely helpful. If you have an iPad or a tablet, I recommend getting a fake Apple Pen. I got one from Amazon like about a year and a half ago. It was about $30, but I was able to write my notes directly into the program, which really helps with memory retention. I have a paper textured screen protector on my iPad, so it really just feels like writing regular notes, but better because it's neater, it looks nicer, and there's unlimited options for formatting, color coding, font size, whatever, you name it. The second reason why digital notes are better is because you can reorganize, go back in and change things. This is essential for subjective classes like IB/HL history, which is the example we're running with here. If you are using the timeline concepts details method, then it's good to work digitally, at least to some extent, so that you don't have a disorganized mess when you have to go back in, cut down, add, or change things. This is especially true if you're trying to work quickly and do as little homework as possible, which, hey, aren't we all? For example, in English, when we started reading a book, I would annotate my book with little colored sticky notes according to certain concepts that I mentally established, and then I would input those concepts into a chart in my OneNote. There was sort of a built-in timeline because I would put the page number, and since it's nonfiction, whatever page it's on is essentially the order of which things happen. For example, with The Stranger by Camus, I annotated my book according to concepts like his mother, his feelings of irritation, physical discomfort, observations of other people's behavior, and his own sociopathic behaviors. So these concepts helped me to easily draw concrete examples when writing about themes like isolation, social conformity, and identity. This method was fantastic for me. It was organized, it was easy, and especially because it's IB English, you read books in grade 11 and 12, and then that's your entire course, and for your final exam you draw from books from both of those years. And sometimes I just don't remember what I read until I go back in and look at my organized, effectively made notes. This method helped me to earn a 7 in IB/HL English Literature A, which I can make a separate video on, but I'm telling you, it works. Point being, this method is best done digitally because when it's a subjective class, sometimes you just have to go back in and you don't learn everything all at once. Things come as they come. For example, at cross country, I would be reading my books and the themes would come up and I would just put them right into my OneNote, literally on my phone at the meet. So the third reason why digital notes are better is because they literally just look better. As I mentioned, any platform you use, OneNote, Word, Google Docs, Notion, you can customize your notes however you want them to look. There's so many color palettes you can choose from. It's just neater. You type instead of write, and if you want to write, you can easily erase. Personally, I prefer that. And finally, the fourth reason why digital notes are superior is because you can collaborate. By the end of the year, when IB exams rolled around, nobody had time to make notes all on their own. Everybody was sharing documents. We were studying together left and right. And I literally would have Google Docs open in class and me and my friends would just all be typing on them at the same time. This was essential for our success when there was a huge information overload around this time of year. Here's a tip with notes. Just be generous and share your notes because other people can only aid your success. They can't detract from your success by using your notes. You are in charge of your success. Just don't even compare yourself to other people. Just set your own goals and work with others, let others help you, help your friends, and you might be surprised what comes out of it. I got the highest academic average in grade 11 and 12. It's not because I was the smartest, it's not because I worked the hardest. I honestly think it had a lot to do with the way I was operating, almost from a place of laziness, just working smarter, not harder. This was a very stressful year for me, just in terms of balancing so many activities, work, school, volunteering, whatever, and I can make a whole separate video on balancing, but I'm telling you, these note-taking strategies work. They work across the board for every class. I hope what I'm saying is helping you to create an idea of how you can take notes this year. So just to recap those 3 strategies for how to optimize your notes. Number 1, organize your classes into categories. So for objective classes, the method is definitions, steps, examples. For subjective classes, the method is timeline, concepts, details. And note that there can be overlap in these methods. Number 2, your homework is your notes. So integrate application questions into your notes, whether that involves annotating your books or color coding, font coding, doing whatever you have to do. Number 3, if you can, choose digital over handwritten. It's easier easier to access, it's easier to organize and reorganize, it looks better and cleaner, and you can collaborate with people. So whether you're handwriting your notes or using digital notes or going solo dolo or collaborating with other people, just get what you need to get for the school year, do what you gotta do, and I believe in you and you got this. And thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate it even more if you could just like, comment, or share. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about handwritten versus digital, because I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say. Have a great school year, and I'll see you in the next video.